Dr. Stephanie Seneff of MIT predicts that by 2032, which is 13 years from now, less than a generation, 1 in 2 children will have autism. 80% of boys will have autism. We can't survive as a country if we get anywhere near that figure.
The good news, Sean, is that autism is preventable, treatable, and recoverable. If you come away with nothing else, autism is preventable, treatable, and recoverable.
Hey friends, before we begin this blockbuster interview revealing the link between vaccines and autism, I want to let you know that despite what YouTube says, this video is appropriate for advertising. And that's according to our friends at Rugged Reserves, who brings you the Night Protector. The new Patriot flashlight kit contains one of the most reliable, durable, brightest flashlights available on the market. This powerful tactical flashlight has 1200 lumens in 5 brightness modes, including very, very soft and very blinding. And it's waterproof. It also has a rechargeable lithium battery, a belt holder, and a deluxe protective storage case. And it's made of durable aircraft-grade aluminum. And for a limited time, you can save 20% on the Patriot flashlight kit using promo code SGT20. Just visit thepatriotkit.com. I'll leave the link below this video. And now, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. I have a powerful interview. We're going to talk about autism again today. It's a topic that we will continue to talk about as it's becoming increasingly clear that there is a government, Department of Justice cover-up of the now proven link between vaccines and the potential for autism. I have on the line right now Ed Aranga. He's the president and founder of Autism One, and his wife Terry, who's the executive director over at Autism One. And I want to thank my friend Carrie Rivera for getting us in touch. Ed and Terry, welcome.
Thank you, Sean.
Hey, thanks for coming on. Hey, before we begin, I want to let you guys know that there's some divine intervention and serendipity happening on my channel. It's happened so many times just recently. And today, just 38 minutes before this scheduled interview, I got an email from a doctor who I do not know, and he sent this link to a Cheryl Atkinson video about the link between vaccination and autism confirmed. Let me just play this for you guys to set the stage.
Today we investigate one of...
All right, I'm going to pause it there. Now, Ed and Terry, I don't typically play such long clips. I tend to break them up, but I think to set the stage, it's very, very important for people to understand that these pharmaceutical companies colluded with the government, and in 1988, they set up the Federal Vaccine Court, which provides essentially indemnity for these pharmaceutical companies. If they damage your child, the vaccine companies don't pay. It's an absolute outrage. And boy, does my heart go out to that father with that son, because in that clip, we see that vibrant little boy, that little toddler running around, healthy as can be. And as a teenager, my God, the nightmare for that young man and for that family to live with a severely, profoundly autism-affected son. It's just an outrage, folks, isn't it?
Well, Sean, it actually... it goes back farther than the Full Measure interview. You've mentioned the 1980s, but the powers that be have known that there's been a problem since at least the early 2000s. There was the clandestine Simpsonwood meeting in Norcross, Georgia. If I'm not mistaken, that was in the year 2000, and there were industry representatives and agency representatives there, and they knew that there was a problem, but in different series of iterations of the Verstraeten study, the signal where there was a problem with the interplay between vaccine components or components and neurological disorders was downplayed until the signal was weakened in study and study after study. So that data was manipulated. And in the Full Measure show that you just were referencing, the transcript on the internet dated Sunday, January 6th, goes on to say that Dr. Zimmerman has provided remarkable new information. He claims that during the vaccine hearings all those years ago, he privately told government lawyers that vaccines can and did cause autism in some children. That turnabout from the government's own chief medical expert stood to change everything about the vaccine autism debate if the public were to find out. And the full measure transcript goes on to say, quoting Dr. Zimmerman, referencing Dr. Zimmerman, on June 15, 2007, he took aside the Department of Justice or DOJ lawyers he worked for defending vaccines in vaccine court. He told them that he discovered, quote, exceptions in which vaccinations could cause autism, end quote. Quote, I explained that in a subset of children, vaccine-induced fever and immune stimulation did cause regressive brain disease with features of autism spectrum disorder, end quote. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Is referenced in the full measure interview, and it says, this panicked the two DOJ attorneys, and they immediately fired Zimmerman. That was on a Friday, and over the weekend they called Zimmerman and said his services would no longer be needed. They wanted to silence him. And finally, what I'll share with you is that it says, days after the Department of Justice lawyers fired Dr. Zimmerman as their expert witness, he alleges, they went on to misrepresent his opinion to continue to debunk autism claims. Records show that on June 18, 2007, a DOJ attorney, Dr. Zimmerman spoke to, told Vaccine Court, quote, we know, referring to Dr. Zimmerman's views on the issue. There is no scientific basis for a connection, end quote, between vaccines and autism. Dr. Zimmerman now calls that, quote, highly misleading. So, Sean, his opinion was misrepresented, and thousands of children's claims were dismissed. They were dismissed. There was a project and an article subsequently published in Pace Environmental Law Journal, a peer-reviewed journal, where families whose children were awarded damages, and it's not a non-contentious process, as people may be led to believe, but children who were awarded damages, say, for something like encephalopathy, their families reported that they just so happened to also have autism. So there is a connection between awards having been paid out for vaccine injury and individuals who have autism. Mm-hmm. It's just not that that's what the diagnosis is that they were given the award for. Ed?
Right.
Sean, let me jump in here for a moment and address the question of vaccine court. I think it's very important because it's not a court, it's an administrative hearing, such that you don't have the same rules you have in court. You don't have discovery. You don't have subpoena power. So it's rigged from the get-go to protect the vaccine manufacturers. Also, excuse me for 1 second, little cough. Also, Cheryl Atkinson talks about the 5,000 cases that were pending before the court. That was the reason for the omnibus hearings. If parents had known about a vaccine court, which most do not, it would not have been 5,000 cases pending. It would have been hundreds of thousands of cases pending.
That's right.
I'm a parent. I have two boys on the spectrum, 24 and 20 really young men. And at the time, my oldest was diagnosed in 1997. I had no idea there was even such a thing as a vaccine court. And the statute of limitations is 3 years. So you have to file within 3 years from the time of diagnosis. And most parents, I would say 90% of parents, have no idea about this court.
Well, and let me tell you this. the diagnoses that were happening back in the early 2000s, the late 90s, were very difficult to obtain because in our personal experience with our oldest son, he was diagnosed when he was a little guy with a nonverbal processing disorder. So back then, they couldn't quite pinpoint what the issue was, but the diagnoses were a little fuzzy and the treatments were, of course, even more fuzzy. And the best they could say was a nonverbal processing disorder. Well, what does that mean? It means he has a hard time reading facial expressions and emotions, and he has a hard time with all the nonverbals, which is what kids with Asperger's suffer from. So back then, they weren't even really able to diagnose these kids properly, much less treat them.
Sean, first of all, I've verified for you that the Simpsonwood meeting at the Simpsonwood Retreat Center in Norcross, Georgia, was in 2000, and your listeners can find that 259 or so page transcript if they put in search words to Google of Simpsonwood, Norcross, Georgia, vaccines, and look and Safe Minds, SAFEMINDS. There's a huge transcript, and as you're saying, different labels are mentioned in this Simpsonwood meeting. One of the people there even said that he was concerned about his new grandson being given the thimerosal-containing vaccines. If I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah,
that.
by the way, guys, thimerosal, for those who don't know, young parents that are listening to this or pregnant women that are listening to this, please listen closely. The thimerosal is the mercury adjuvant that's contained in these vaccines, or at least was back then. You guys correct me. Did they get all of the thimerosal out of these vaccines? They tell us they did. I highly doubt it.
The Geyers looked at this and found, especially with the uptick in flu shots, flu vaccine campaigns, they found out that people could still be getting so much mercury, and that seemed to be confusing. So while the public was being told that mercury was being decreased, here were all these public campaigns to get people to take all of these flu shots, and it's not just mercury.
Well, let me jump in, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong on this. As it pertains to the flu shot, here's my understanding of why there might be mercury in some flu shots. If you go to the doctor and you get the single, by the way, I do not advocate the flu shot. I've never gotten one. I do not advocate it. Everybody I know who's ever gotten super, super sick from the flu says they got the flu shot that same year. The flu shot, if you go and you get the single dose, the single shot needle where they throw away the needle, my understanding is that is thimerosal free, but the vial, if the doctor is going into a repeated vial, pulling out the vaccine repeatedly, that vial contains the thimerosal.
It's more likely that a multi-dose vial would have it used allegedly as a preservative. However, even if it is said that there's a trace amount, someone like Boyd Haley, if I remember correctly, wouldn't say that that is safe for everybody either if they put it in and then try to get most of it out of that particular batch. Ed was wanting to say something.
Sean, what they do with thimerosal is they use it as a disinfectant, and then supposedly they draw the thimerosal out. But there's no studies that prove the fact that the thimerosal has been removed and the amounts that have been removed.
So we're just supposed to trust these drug companies that have set up a federal vaccine court to provide them complete indemnity, right? We're just supposed to trust them with the lives of our children. Look,
yes.
I just interviewed Dr. B, a pathologist, who is coming public about her great awakening. She used to be an atheist, now she's a Christian. She was faced with having to deal with buckets of aborted baby parts. She had no idea that that was part of the deal when she was in residency to become a pathologist. But now she realizes that that's part of the deal, and it rocked her soul. I am here to tell you folks, my personal belief is that these vaccines are part of a eugenics program, and if they can't get you to abort your baby, they're going to hurt your kid if they can. And my heart goes out again to that father in that piece, that Cheryl Atkinson piece. With that, look, what Dr. B told me in this interview is that she believes that these evil people, pharmaceutical companies and beyond, the global New World Order plan is to destroy families. And what better way to do it if they can't get you to abort your child than to destroy your child's brain? Rant over.
Sean, I have three things to say to you, if I may. First of all, getting back to what Ed was saying about thimerosal being used allegedly as a preservative. Actually, what I'd heard years ago is that, you know, it was used so vaccines didn't need to be made in the cleanest conditions. But decades and decades and decades ago, the late Dr. Frank Engley authored a study, and it showed that mercury wasn't even sufficient, wasn't reliably sufficient as a bactericide on streptococci. So that's one thing. Number two, you're talking about the DNA and the aborted fetal tissue cell lines. Teresa Deischer, if people would like to look up Teresa Deischer, she also has done work on the deleterious nature of this in regard to autism. Finally, you're talking about how profoundly affected some of the individuals with autism are. And a lot of times people like to say, oh, there's not a real epidemic. It's always been this way. It's diagnostic substitution, demographic shift. But back in a previous decade, the UC Davis Mind Institute studied this, and they showed that it was not due to diagnostic substitution or demographic shift. California was the state with the best statistics, and they charted full syndrome autism. These are not what some say quirky. These are not individuals with quirks. Full syndrome autism has symptoms like being nonverbal,
right,
like teenagers and adults who are still in pull-ups.
right.
They can't be missed. They wouldn't have been missed in a classroom when you and I were going to school. And that epidemic rise was charted of the full syndrome autism in California. Let me read you from the CDC's own website and we know that the statistic on their website is now 1 child in 59, and it's more for boys than girls. And Boyd Haley talks about how testosterone and mercury have synergistic activity, whereas estrogen is protective. But there are different theories on why it's more in boys than girls. The CDC's own website says that over the last 12 years, the prevalence of autism increased 289.5%. And then back a long time ago, 2006 to 2008, data from a study showed that developmental disabilities were common. About 1 in 6 children, and that was over 10 years ago. Dr. Weldon, Dave Weldon, Congressman Dave Weldon, used to say that you couldn't swing a cat without touching upon someone who was affected.
Sean, could I touch upon your point about getting a diagnosis in the early 2000s and how difficult that was?
Yeah, please do, because I wanted to ask you about the subset of children and why do you guys think certain kids are affected and certain kids aren't? That's where the research really needs to go, because 1 in 59 is absolutely off the charts. It's probably even worse than that. And my understanding is that in the Amish community where they don't vaccinate, the occurrence of autism is somewhere around 1 in 10,000. Anyway, this issue gets me very fired up because I know how many people are hurting out there because of these vaccines. Yes, but please go ahead. Ed?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the difficulty getting a diagnosis. And what has happened to the vaccine injured is we have been tribalized. So you have all these different conditions, ADHD, ADD, OCD, on and on and on. And each community has its own philosophy and its own understanding, not realizing it all stems from the same underlying cause, which is the vaccine. So you talk to a person, a parent whose child has ADHD, and they go to their doctor and they get a prescription drug, but they don't recognize they're part of the larger family of vaccine-injured children. And this goes on and on across the board. The tremendous rise in childhood diabetes, childhood cancer, all of these are triggered by the vaccines, yet none of the communities talk to each other directly.
Sean, you had mentioned, we had been talking about mercury earlier, and I had shared with you that it's not just mercury and it's not just aborted fetal tissue. When the mercury was decreased, there was an uptick in the aluminum content. There was an uptick in the aluminum adjuvant, and that's also very deleterious. Part of what's going to be going on site when the Autism One 2019 conference is held in Chicago is there's going to be the 4th annual HPV Vaccine Education Symposium. And one of the speakers, one of our international speakers from Israel, is Dr. Yehuda Schoenfeld. And so he will be talking about HPV vaccine and autoimmunity. So that's another consideration. Autoimmunity, aluminum, molecular mimicry. That's molecular mimicry is when there's there's something similar and the body reacts and attacks its own tissue because it's similar to the deleterious agent that has come on board.
Terry, let me just jump in and say something for these new viewers, pregnant mothers, young parents, anybody who's listening to whom this information may be quite new. We jumped pretty much right into the deep end with this conversation. So I want to let people know that conference about which you just referred, the 4th International HPV Education Symposium, that's the HPV Merck Gardasil vaccine, folks. That's the one the doctors will push on your 10 and 11 and 12-year-old daughter who's non-sexually active, still a virgin, but they will try to force that 3 doses of the HPV vaccine into your daughter. And I'd highly recommend that you research it. Go to YouTube and research Gardasil damaged daughter. It's also damaging boys, folks. They're pushing this stuff on boys, and it's absolutely evil. I'm not sure how these salespeople from Merck sleep at night. I guess they tell themselves little lies that, one damaged kid is worth it because they think they're helping 1,000 others that don't get damaged. I'm glad you guys have that HPV conference. I want to let people know you're not alone if your kid has autism. Go to autism1.org. There is an autism conference in Chicago this year from May 22nd to May 26th, where Science, Hope, and Recovery meet. That will be at the Lowe's Chicago O'Hare Hotel, the Autism One 2019 conference. You can get the information, click the banner at the very top of autism1.org. Guys, I think one of the facts about having autism or a kid with autism, a child with autism, is that people feel very alone and very isolated. And that's why I think this conversation with you folks is so important. Autism One is about getting people together so that they can learn about the latest science and the latest potential treatments. Because again, my God, does my heart go out to a father with a young man, or any parent with a full-grown young adult that is so damaged that they're still wearing diapers. Again, it's an absolute life sentence, and it was forced upon you. You were unknowing. It's not your fault. We all believed in this stuff. We've been indoctrinated since childhood that vaccines are good. Vaccines are good. And now we know that vaccines damage. And I want to read this. It's the affidavit dated September 7th, 2018 from Dr. Andrew Zimmerman, who says he took DOJ lawyers aside in 2007 and he told them he discovered exceptions in which vaccinations could cause autism. He said, I explained that in a subset of children, vaccine-induced fever and immune stimulation did cause regressive, brain disease, that's brain damage, folks, with features of autism spectrum disorder, end quote. Ed and Terry, I want to ask you this. When my boys were little and we were so stupid and so trusting and we went and they got their vaccinations time and time again, their well baby visits and all that crap where they'd get stabbed with these needles, they always had fevers. And then my kids were always sick. That's one of the trademarks of these kids that get all the vaccines is that they're more sick more often, aren't they?
Ed felt like when he used to try to talk to colleagues at work that they backed away from him as if he were contagious and looked at him as if he had just landed on from an alien spaceship.
But these kids get the fever, right? They get the shot, then they get these terrible fevers. My kids got the fevers, and they'll tell you when your kids get the vaccines too that that's completely normal, right? That's completely normal. But for the really unlucky parents, their kids get the terrible fevers, and then a day or two later, the brain's gone, and they've got full-blown autism. Thank God that's not our case. In our case, our kids didn't get full-blown autism. Praise God. But for those who did, it is an absolute life sentence. Let me ask you guys this, for the young parents listening or the pregnant mothers listening, which vaccine is the one that really seems to be a trigger? Is it the MMR vaccine? Is there one we can point to specifically that seems to be very, very suspect?
We don't like to, we would like parents to do their own thorough research on this topic, but they can get much information over at the Autism One conference. We know that Dr. William Thompson you've referenced Dr. William Thompson yourself before, right?
Yeah, and I believe his story is well documented in the documentary Vaxxed, correct?
Yes, and he was talking about the MMR vaccine, and he said, I regret, he addressed the MMR vaccine. You're asking about which vaccine does this or that. He said, I regret that my co-authors and I omitted statistically significant information in our 2004 article published in the journal Pediatrics. The omitted data suggested that African-American males who received the MMR vaccine before 36 months were at an increased risk for autism. And, that is a very important statement. How many children might have been spared injury from that? Ed has some information about the HPV vaccine and in relation to African-American women, it doesn't even contain the strain that would be applicable to them. But you're saying that the powers that be would say that it was helpful to people. Ed?
Sean, I would recommend that moms and parents not get any of the vaccines, particularly MMR, DTP, but you name it. None of the vaccines do what they are supposed to do in as far as helping the children. I think a very interesting point is the fact that over the last several decades, SAT scores have been plummeting. Children are getting more and more disabled. And it's not, some children, it's not readily apparent. But no matter what vaccine they get, they have been damaged. So that now the SAT scores are graded on a curve. And actually having these childhood illnesses makes you more intelligent. It's not just that it gives you lifelong immunity. It's not just that your body is strengthened, your mind is also strengthened. So it's part of nature's way of strengthening the species. But then you have these vaccine manufacturers come in and damage the child. So I would recommend that parents reject each and every vaccination.
Well, and let me say something about the HPV vaccine, this Gardasil. I want your guys' opinion on this. It's my understanding, and I haven't done the research in a long time, so I'm going off memory here, that the Gardasil vaccine, I believe, their claim is that it protects, I think, maybe 2 or 3 strains of more than 100 potential strains of
Correct.
HPV cancer.
Correct.
And so what they're asking you to do, well, and by the way, once a young woman hits puberty and starts to have a menstrual cycle, and then maybe potentially later in life becomes sexually active, it's my understanding that the menstrual cycle 9 times out of 10 would cleanse any of that stuff out of the system that might lead to cancer anyway. So what Merck is asking you to do with your non-sexually active 10 or 11-year-old daughter is gamble with her life and gamble with her health and get this vaccine for which the doctors are awarded, I think, a substantial little stipend for each of the 3 doses that your daughter would be given. You're being asked to gamble with your daughter's life based on the potentiality that it's slightly possible that maybe someday she might get cervical cancer, and that this would be a fail stop to prevent that, even though the vaccine itself only protects against a couple of the many, 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 more than 100 variants of the cervical cancer. It's enraging, is it not?
Well, the thing about what you're mentioning, Sean, is there are hundreds of HPV virus strains. And when they first came out with the vaccination, it covered only 2 of those strains. What's just enraging is the fact that they market heavily to the African American community. Billboards and bus stations, all kinds of ads for Gardasil. And the 2 strains that the vaccine guarded against, African American women never got cervical cancer from those strains. And they knew this, but they targeted the African American community to help sell the vaccine. So the human body almost always clears the virus itself. And when it doesn't, pap smears can readily tell if the woman is at risk. And it was an unnecessary vaccine that was added to the schedule to simply increase the profits of pharma, and also part of the greater agenda to reduce the population.
It's important for parents to do their own thorough research and to be comfortable with their own decision and respected for their own decision.
All right. Well, the other thing is that I would really encourage people to do that research that Terry just recommended you do before going to see your doctor and before having these vaccines pushed on you, because many, many doctors are a bit forceful in their insistence that your children be vaccinated. And there's a doctor that lives in my neighborhood. I like the guy very much. He's a very friendly guy, but he's completely brainwashed as it pertains to vaccines. And he in particular has pushed the Merck Gardasil vaccine on many of our neighbors. And it became quite a topic of conversation among some of the women who are well informed. And this doctor just doesn't know any better, and he will not listen to reason. I think at the end of the day, guys, that's really the thing that really kills me. And that's why my conversation with Dr. B, the pathologist, was so buoying to my spirit. There are many doctors starting to wake up. In her case, she woke up to the eugenics programs, to abortion, to the deep state attack on our families. And it really turned her from an atheist into a Christian as she had this profound awakening. But in the case of this doctor in my neighborhood that I just referenced, the man cannot be reached, and he'll just continue to push this Gardasil on unknowing parents that take their young daughters to see him. And it's just appalling. And again, I'm not sure how these Merck execs sleep at night. I'm really not sure. Any ideas on that?
Not sure about that, but people can visit the sanevax.org website to see what's happened to some young ladies who have had this. And I think there was even a legislator who took her son in California, and he just dropped down in the office, right in the doctor's office. There are practices who will dismiss families for not getting, following the vaccination schedule they think that they should. So to describe the 4th Annual International HPV Vaccine Education Symposium, Sean, there will be international experts from more than 10 countries sharing their research and explaining why they believe there are multiple unanswered questions regarding HPV vaccine safety, efficacy, and need. So,
And they're pushing that vaccine on boys now, too. Have you seen the commercials, guys? They're pushing the HPV vaccine on boys and girls, and it's already hurt girls. I saw a YouTube video specifically about a young man who was completely paralyzed, and he's since passed after he got the HPV vaccine. His mom
was that Colton Barrett?
Yes. Yes, absolutely, absolutely enraging. And my heart goes out to his mother. He was an active young man. He played sports. Then he got these damn HPV shots, and now he's dead. So how is this still being marketed? How is Merck allowed to sell this crap? Any ideas on that? Is it because we have a crooked government and a Department of Justice that should really be labeled the Department of Injustice, as they covered up this vaccine autism connection back in 2007? And still to this day?
Yeah, you're correct. It's the Department of Injustice, Sean. 53% of the children in this country now suffer from a chronic illness. 53%. Let me throw this statistic out to you and your audience. Dr. Stephanie Seneff of MIT predicts that by 2032, which is 13 years from now, less than a generation, 1 in 2 children will have autism. 80% of boys will have autism. Sean, we can't survive as a country if we get anywhere near that figure. Currently, 2% of children have autism. 1 in 24 boys has autism. The military can't get enough men to fill its ranks. A couple years ago, they allowed women to serve in combat roles. And everybody applauded. Oh, the generals had an epiphany. Women are equal to men. No, they ran out of men, and they couldn't come back and say, we have to reinstitute the draft. The country would have rejected that. So instead, they put women in the military roles men used to fill. 85% of the people who want to serve in the military can't pass the physical. So we're at a very dangerous tipping point where this country, as the founders said, we will never be invaded. What's going to cause the downfall of this country is the internal. If internally we're sabotaged, which we're being done every minute of every day, that's what's going to bring this country down.
Yeah, you're right about that. And they're trying to destroy the families, folks. This is just a plan of eugenics. And that's why Dr. B was right. This is a plan to destroy families. She's got it all documented. She's done the research. It lines up with the research I've done. I want to talk to you guys before we let you go about the conference in Chicago, May 22nd to 26th. You can tell us about that in a second. But before we do, please give me your thoughts on a fascist government aligned against the people. If the government is going to be in bed with these big pharma companies, how in the world are we to protect ourselves and our families, especially when criminal Governor Jerry Brown out there in California signed into law SB 277 requiring mandatory vaccinations, whether or not you homeschool your kid, private school your kid, or send them to a public school. I thought that would be the tipping point in California that would lead to some sort of revolution. Evidently, I was wrong.
Well, we're in California, Sean, and the resistance continues. Although it was a tremendous blow, the fact that the state Senate passed this and Brown signed it was a tremendously difficult decision for families to face, and many families did leave California.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because how are you supposed to fight a tyrannical law like that? You have to move out of the state, or you have to allow your child to get the government mandated needle?
Right. You're put in this position where the government has absolute authority over your child's body. And it doesn't stop there, Sean. This is just the beginning. They have now adults are mandated to get it if they're around children. If you have a daycare center, the adults that work there have to get the vaccinations. You see it when nurses are forced to get the vaccinations. So what they want to do is move to a position that everybody has to be vaccinated to get a passport, to get on a plane, you name it. So they're coming after the adults next.
I cannot express how tyrannical that is. That is Nazi-esque levels of tyranny. For the state to say, you must allow us to give your kid these shots, even though the big pharma companies have indemnity, you can't sue them if they poison or hurt your child, if they give your child brain damage. They're off the hook, but you're going to have to do it anyway because you're a peasant, you're a serf. You are on the plantation of this government, big pharma fascist, big brother tyranny. It just outrages me, you guys. I really, really thought that the people of California would reach their tipping point when that criminal governor had the audacity to sign that Nazi-esque bill into law. It's just beyond the pale.
One thing you might not know, Sean, is years before that, California allowed 11-year-old girls to make the decision to get the HPV vaccine or not, regardless of what the parent wanted. So what they did was they lowered the age of consent to 11 so that when the school children, they would be almost forced to take the HPV vaccine and they didn't have to tell their parents. So what would happen they would say to a classroom, if everybody in this class gets the HPV vaccine, all the girls, we're going to go to McDonald's.
Oh my God.
And what 11-year-old girl is going to stand up to the class and go, I'm not going to get it? She'd be ostracized.
As a parent, I would not be able to control myself if I found out that happened.
What's so dangerous,
in the trust of these public indoctrination camps, especially in California. California is so far off the rails, folks. California ought to be broken into at least 4 different states. I mean, because the people down in, where is it, Sacramento?
Sacramento.
The people in Sacramento are absolutely nuts. Look, I'm sorry. This topic enrages me because I know that if I could rewind time and not have my children be vaccinated at all. And believe me, folks, I wised up. We have more than 2 children, and the younger children did not get the vaccinations. So I wised up over time, but it just breaks my heart for those of you listening who trusted the system and are now living with children who have been adversely affected by vaccinations. And the government can no longer say, and these talking heads in the media can no longer say there's no connection. We know there's a connection. It's proven. It's quantifiable.
Vaccine-induced fever and immune stimulation did cause regressive brain disease with features of autism spectrum disorder.
And we're going to talk about it, and I guarantee you that YouTube will demonetize this video saying it's not suitable for most advertisers because evidently most advertisers don't want truth spoken. And I know that's a bunch of poppycock. It's a bunch of garbage. YouTube is trying to kill truth. They don't want the truth out there, and neither does the government, neither does Big Pharma. Guys, tell people about the conference in Chicago. I'm very proud of what you're doing. Thank you for being there for people who are in need of information and help and support. There's nothing more isolating than being a parent feeling that you're the only one. And you're all alone, and there's nowhere to turn. And it just breaks my heart. Carrie Rivera told me that one of the leading causes of death among these kids is murder-suicide from these single moms with these kids with full-blown pandas that you can't get any sleep. You can't get any sleep with some of these poor kids. And these poor women, my heart just goes out to them. There's no support. There's nowhere to turn, and they just end up in poverty and just absolute desperation. So tell people about the conference in Chicago.
Well, thanks, Sean. Let me share with you, and then I'll get to information about pandas. So yes, parents do come away from with hope and are invigorated by the networking experience. It's invaluable to parents and on their children's behalf to be there in person. So this is the Autism One 2019 conference in Chicago, May 22nd through 26th, 2019. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to give a keynote. And the good news, Sean, is that autism is preventable, treatable, and recoverable. If you come away with nothing else, autism is preventable, treatable, and recoverable. Individuals have recovered from autism. In fact, Marcia Hines wrote a book called I Know You're In There about her son, who was significantly affected by quote-unquote autism. And he is now an adult, and he has a typical life. So autism is recoverable. And treatable. That is why it is so important that parents get good information early on about how this is a biomedical disorder, such as dysfunction in the immune system, rather than some hardwired genetic psychological thing. She was told that he would probably need to be institutionalized, or that he would need to be institutionalized. But he is living a typical life today, independent, enjoying life, having friends, having a great job, taking trips independently. So different tracks at this conference include the PANDAS track, the membrane medicine track, the HPV vaccine education symposium we talked about earlier, and we have had in the past a young lady who had HPV vaccine injury who did recover herself from that. So there is hope for that too. One of the large parts of the conference is the Chiropractic Pediatric Continuing Education Credit Program, with emphasis on autism, to bring a new body of equip a new body of professionals to help these children and families across the country. There are so many different tracks at this conference. It spans 5 days. It has about 140 speakers. And most of the days there are things going on from early morning until late into the evening. So there is much opportunity for parents to get scientific information from well-credentialed professionals and awesome parents who have researched to the ends of the earth for their children and help their children improve or recover.
All right. Oh, well, that's fantastic news. Autism 2019 conference, May 22nd to 26th, 2019, where science, hope, and recovery meet. That will be at the Lowe's Chicago O'Hare Hotel. And I guess, Ed, final word from you. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate you having set up autism1.org. People need support, people need hope, and people need treatment for their children. So evidently, you guys can learn a lot about that here at autism1.org. Final word from you, Ed.
Okay, thank you, Sean, and thank you for what you do. And thank you for having Carrie on.
I love Carrie Rivera. Yeah, we love Carrie Rivera.
Yes, we do. She's one in a million. My final thought is our children do get better. And that's never talked about in mainstream medicine, mainstream media. Children with autism recover and they get better. The diagnosis of autism does not have to be a prognosis of now and forever. We do get, we've recovered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children and helped thousands and thousands. So it's important for a parent who's listening, who has bought into the inevitable that your child will always be like this. It's not true. There is hope out there. And another final point I'd like to make is we also have an advocacy track on how to fight back effectively. What you can do as a parent to oppose this tyrannical system that is destroying this nation. So thank you very much, Sean, and I hope you and your listeners have a great day.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure, Ed and Terry. Thank you so much for your time. Guys, our guests have been Ed and Terry Aranga, president and founder of Autism One and the executive director. You can visit the site autism1.org. Guys, thank you so much for listening. If you're still with us at this point, do give us a like and spread this information within your own sphere of influence on social media. We have to get the word out. There's many, many parents and children who are suffering, and many, many soon-to-be parents who need to understand this information, and they need to know the truth about vaccines. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Love you all, and for real news 24/7, visit us at sgtreport.com. God bless.
You're free to have an abortion, but you're not free to not vaccinate your child. So at what point does the government stop stepping in on how we want to heal our bodies?